I've been joined this afternoon by Andy Duncan. Thank you for coming, Andy. Can I ask you, your very first appearance in the band records was on the 28th of August 1977 at a Christmas EMI recording with Helen MacArthur.
Right.
And you're listed as playing second baritone that day.
Yeah.
Do you remember that? And do you remember your thoughts when you joined the band and the band around that time?
Yeah, very much. I mean, because there was a group of us who played in the junior band, moving to the senior band was, and still is, I'm sure, quite a big gap. And so it wasn't just a sort of musical move, it was more of a sort of rite of passage. And suddenly you were playing alongside sort of men, you know, who were very different in their culture than obviously the kids. So I remember it well. I remember recording and the sort of discipline of the recording and retakes and everything. It was my first experience of doing that. So yeah, I remember it well.
And I've mentioned there a few characters and conductors who were around the stands at that time, of course.
Yeah. I mean, the main conductor at the time was Alan Street, who was a composer, arranger, as well as a conductor. And he was quite a personality. He was a very small man, physically. Very, very good musician, and I remember being quite impressed by that. And we did quite a number of contests with him at that time.
During these early days, the band had a few conductors, as you're mentioning, including Derek Broadbent from the famous Brickhouse and Rastrick band. What was he like with the band?
He was very good. I mean, he was the top of his sort of fame at the time from the floral dance. And so having him come up and conduct us was quite a big deal. And I think we did a recording of Whitburn Academy with him. A CD, actually, a sort of, not a light CD, a sort of more formal one.
Yeah, there is a photograph of the band outside Whitburn Academy with Derek Broadbent for that event. You're also mentioned in the records as playing euphonium, moving from second baritone to euphonium in the band lineup in the late 1970s, and that of course coincided with the arrival of the late great Major Peter Parks. What was the anticipation like around the band for his arrival, and what was he like at rehearsals? What made him arguably one of the greatest conductors that we've ever had in brass band movement?
Well, the first part of your question, there was huge anticipation for getting Major Parks to come up. We were all, I suppose, different people would have different agendas. Maybe some people it was like, can I hold on to my place here? But certainly for the sort of younger set, which I was part of then, it was trying to impress and trying to justify our place in the band and maybe sort of, you know, do well in that regard. That was very much our sort of motivation. It was a completely different type of conductor to the ones that we had had. He was extremely professional. He was really thoroughly prepared. Discipline was a huge thing for him. Maybe his military background, but also just to get the work done. And it was an intensely enjoyable experience. Time just flew with him. So I can remember all that sort of feelings at the time.
In 1979, Andrews, where, according to the band records, you were first mentioned playing the instrument, which of course we know you for best, today, the E-flat bass. How did that come about in 1979?
Well, I wanted to go to college. I wanted to have a go at maybe trying to earn my living playing the tuba. At that time we couldn't go in euphonium, it just wasn't an option. And so I wanted to transfer to E-flat bass from euphonium. So my parents bought me an instrument. It was a Yamaha instrument at the time. And I remember I would sit in the band, there was three of us, because I was just sitting on E-flat bass, really without a place in the band for a little while. So it was really just that was the reason I went on to E-flat bass. It was for that reason, to try and go to college.
The band was very successful in the 1980s. If I was to pick one contest, it would be the national finals at the Albert Hall, London in 1981 with Blitz. The great Jeff Whitham was conducting the band, and it was third place off a number 3 draw on the 3rd of October. Do you remember that day and the performance? What was the band like then? It was certainly a very successful period in the band's history.
Yeah, I remember it very well. It was a major event for us at the time. The band had been progressing in terms of standard, there's no question of that. Because of Major Parks being there, he couldn't take us to that contest because he had Black Dyke Mills. But nevertheless, the band had been advancing, and I don't think we really knew how we sort of compared UK-wide. Jeff did an incredibly good job. It was a very good performance. I can remember that. There was a lot of the pieces, a lot of slow stuff and solos at the start, all went incredibly well. Good atmosphere as well. Playing in the Albert Hall was always something very memorable. The early draw, well, that does, maybe people don't like it ever, but I suppose looking back, if we had that performance later on, maybe we could have done even better. But I certainly remember it well. I remember stopping down en route on the coach in Yorkshire. I think it was somewhere, was it, because Jeff was the conductor of Hammond Sauce Band at the time, maybe it was there. And we did a rehearsal there and that all went well. And I can remember Jeff talking to the band, doing his sort of team talk. And he was saying to us, he says, you as a band don't realise how well you're playing. Now you don't know if is this just sort of get the band up. I mean, I've done it so many times myself. But I think he really meant it, and it did turn out that way.
Absolutely. And then of course the next day in the same venue was the European Championships, which of course doesn't happen now, and that was back with the major that second day. Conducting, and you came fourth at that contest, which must have been incredible.
It was. There was 2 test pieces in.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
in the same day. It was a fantastic weekend. It was hugely enjoyable. The band, of course, at the time was regularly doing 3 rehearsals a week. An awful lot of people lived more locally than obviously became the case later, and there was a real sort of bond to everything. Yeah.
The band, moving on to more serious discussion, the band suffered a tragedy in the early 1980s, in March 1982, when David McMillan was killed in a tragic accident at the age of 19, just weeks before the Scottish Championships. How did the band take that news, and how did the players move on from that? It must have been a deeply sad time in the band's history. It
was devastating. I mean, Davy was probably my best friend at the time. We used to share rooms at Best of Brass and all that sort of thing. We were the sort of group of us, I keep talking about this group of half a dozen of us or so who were all the same sort of age. We're about to go on to college. I had got a place at Guildhall in London. I was going off to do that. Davy had got a place, I think, at Huddersfield to study with Philip McCann, and he was hugely looking forward to that. It turned us upside down. I mean, particularly being the same sort of age, and we just soldiered on. I mean, there's no question of it. Davy wouldn't have wanted us not to do the Scottish, but yeah, it had a profound effect when you're in such a sort of strong, bonded group, and something like that happens. It was a tragedy without.
Absolutely, and that family group that you talk about there is something that a lot of people have talked about over the years. At the end of 1982 and on to 1983, your name dips in and out of the band records. Was that when you moved on down to college at Guildhall to study E-flat bass and of course become a professional musician, which is what you are now? How big a part of playing with Whitburn did that influence your decision to become a professional player?
Oh, it was everything. I mean, I owe everything to the band. If I didn't happen to have been in Whitburn, I probably wouldn't have played in the band. So in terms of my career as a professional brass player, absolutely 100% because I played in the band, there's no question of that. I mean, I'd also have to give credit to West Lothian Council because I did start in the school system and then joined the junior band. So, but the whole setup at the time in Whitburn and West Lothian Academy made it possible for me.
You of course studied in Edinburgh and then Guildhall School of Music in London before a long successful period as principal tuba with the Hallé Orchestra. But then if we zip forward in time to summer 2003, you were asked to conduct the band at the West Lothian Challenge. How did that come about, and what did it feel like to stand in front of a band of Whitburn's calibre that you had used to play in for the first time?
Well, I mean, I had done a bit of conducting before that. I actually left the Hallé in 2000. So for a couple of years I had gone across to live in West Yorkshire from Manchester, and I was conducting the Hepworth Band in Yorkshire. And I conducted Kingdom Brass at the Scottish the same year, and I think people just came in to see how I was doing, sort of thing. And then got asked to do the West Lothian. I mean, I had a bit of a relationship with Whitburn because I had done a few arrangements for the band for Brass and Concert, or was it called that then? Spennymoor. So I think that was the sort of the route, if you like, and the logic behind that.
Yeah. Later on that year, you were appointed permanently to conduct the band, with the first two contests being the Troon contest, where the band were placed second, and then the British Open, where the band played Venus and Jupiter from the Planet Suite, arranged by Stephen Roberts. Do you want to pick up the story from there on that day?
Yeah, sure thing. First of all, Troon, we thought we'd won Troon. It was one of these contests, and it still irks a little. The band played really well, the band was playing well, and the planets, the two movements that you said, Venus and Jupiter, that's a piece that I knew really well from the Hallé. We used to play it a dozen times a year, and it was that was definitely the biggest conducting job I'd ever done with a band, to do that. And so my sort of thoughts very much were focused on getting the same, not just the sounds, but the style and everything that an orchestra would do. But we even changed a bit of the scoring, I could remember, which was to thicken it up here and there. But the main kind of plank of the performance relied on your soprano cornet player in the first part. And Gordon Jenkins was playing then. And yeah, rehearsals were pretty good. It was going well. We were heading towards doing a good performance. But of course, it was, as I say, you did have to rely on this happening. And Gordon played most beautifully on the day. He really did. We had a good draw, somewhere 7 or 8, I think. And the solos that were in the soprano cornet part were sort of oboe solos and violin solos, and they were to sound effortless and delicate and expressive, and he did all of that. It was absolutely beautiful. So we were in really good stead when we played the slower part in Venus to go into Jupiter. Yeah, it was a strong performance, and I can remember people saying that we'd done well, and then when we got to the results, obviously they do the reverse order thing. But before that, Gordon had won the best soloist, which is something they don't give lightly. You know, it's not a compensation thing. It's a very hard fought thing. And then they kept announcing results, and we got second, and it was quite an incredible result.
Absolutely, a fantastic day. And how was that for you? It must have been a dream as a conductor to stand in front of a band and get a result like that at such a big contest from the band where you had developed so much of your playing from.
Yeah, it was. I mean, that's true. It was a very personal thing, playing for this band, or conducting this band. It was a great result for the band. I mean, at the time, it was, I think, the best result a Scottish band had had. I mean, it's been repeated since, obviously, more recently by the band, but I don't know if anybody's bettered it since. I'm not sure, no. I think there's a bit of naivety from my point of view, because I didn't know. I mean, I knew it was a good result, but I didn't know how hard it is to do that. So it certainly, I suppose, set me up well personally in terms of a brass band conducting career.
Absolutely. Yeah. And of course that fantastic success was continued with more success over the years at Troon, along with appearances at the Westphalian Challenge, where the band played a lot of your own compositions and arrangements with great success. How was it to write for the brass band and have so much of your music getting played by this band?
Well, as a composer arranger, it's great to have a band of this quality to write for, and you do write for them. You're sort of thinking of the players as you're doing it. You're arranging it slightly in that vein, and yeah, it's a great pleasure to do that. And some arrangements work better than others, and you could sort of have it as a bit of a trial ground, I suppose.
Absolutely. Another tragedy unfortunately befell the band, with eerie similar connections to David Macmillan, when the band's first horn player, Craig Patterson, was killed in an accident just weeks before the Scottish Championships again in 2006. How important did you feel your job as a conductor was getting the band to the stage and the contest, and looking after them, as it were, during that time, not as a player now, but now as a figurehead of the band?
Well, as you say, it was incredibly sort of strong parallels with Davy when Craig died. Again, I can remember, similar to when I was perhaps a generation before, I had a group of friends in the band, and I greatly empathised with them, with how they felt. It was a very similar thing, and again, the feeling was very much the same thing. We should carry on and do the Scottish. And I remember coming to the first rehearsal just after the news, and I think we just played Whitburn out of the hymn book. There's nothing really anybody could say. It is eerily similar to that situation. and equally tragic.
Yeah. In your time conducting between 2003 and 2006, you and the band clocked up 17 podium places, and of course not forgetting numerous concerts and 2 CDs. When you look back on it now, how is the band to conduct and stand in front of as an organisation, as a powerhouse in banding?
It's always been one of the best bands in Scotland, Whitburn. You know, obviously the rivalry with the co-op, and it's kind of nip and tuck, and it changes about. When I started with the band, I think the co-op were probably in the ascendancy. I didn't win the Scottish with the band in that time, so perhaps you could argue they stayed there. But certainly in terms of other things like the British Open and other competitions and appearances at London and etc., we did dominate to a large extent. So yeah, it's a very good band. It's a very professional band, and it's one that works hard. The players are incredibly dedicated to it. Obviously, without a sponsor, it's a lot of effort from the players in terms of, you know, travelling, finding babysitters, and if you look at that collectively, you know. So it's a great band to conduct. It really was. It was a good time.
So you've kind of preempted my next question. Is now that for some years have passed and you continue to be a working professional tuba player, conductor, composer, and arranger, can I ask how you like to sum up your playing career with the band and your conducting career with the band?
Well, my playing career was definitely one where I was learning fast as a young player. I didn't really play with the band much past college. In fact, I don't think I did at all. Maybe once as a soloist, a couple of times. So in the formative years of doing that, it was essential for me to, you know, to become a professional player. In terms of a conductor, yeah, there was some great contests. It was a very nice experience to play in what was always my band, if you like, and to come back here to Whitburn to do that. So that had that extra sort of dimension, I suppose, added to it as well. Yeah, it's all very positive, actually.
So Andrew Duncan, who went from being a player to a conductor at Whitburn Band, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.